Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in, and of course myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. Before we jump into the episode, I've got to give a special thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, over at Global Wide Advisors, a leading digital consumer products investment bank focused on optimizing the sales process. An incredible team, always happy to pick up the phone and educate you or anyone about the sales process and what you should really consider, and can obviously help take you to market or even acquire businesses. I ring them for just about everything these days. Us over at Multiply Me, we are the end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines, helping find better talent and onboarding them effectively. And last but not least, Escala, our management consultancy focused on process improvement, where we help build better systems for your business. That's all the ads you're going to get from me, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is all about learning. I hope you really enjoy and get as much out of these sessions as I do, sitting face to face with some of the world-renowned leaders in their respective fields, asking them the tough questions that they're not often asked. All right, Chad, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales, my friend. I am just so grateful that you've made the time to come on the show and bestow upon both me and all of my listeners a wealth of knowledge and a ton of value. And so, my friend, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I feel like we met last year in New York at AMZ Innovate, and, for the first time in the flesh, and just really you gravitated toward everything that you had to share, and you were going through a process at that point. I believe you were maybe closing out the sale of Scubana, or you just sold it previously. I can't remember. And you just had a lot of things going on. You had an energy about you that was just so humble and really willing to give and give back. And, there was none of that bullshit that relates to, hey, what am I going to get out of this relationship? And, for me, it's those meaningful relationships that mean so much to me. And, you, my friend, just fit well within that box. So before I get too deep into all of this and showing my gratitude, I'd love it if, for anyone out there who doesn't know you, to get to know you a little bit, Chad. So I'm going to let you take it away and just give your entire background. I mean, go deep. I want to learn myself. I mean, you shared some stuff before we hit record that I didn't know about you. So please, let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me. A little bit about myself. Father first, always, and lead with that. And there was a pretty big priority shift and identity shift for me when I gave birth to my first son. Always identified as an entrepreneur, but really put life into perspective. Over the course of my career, it's all been spent in e-commerce, and it's all about solving problems. So the past over decade and a half has been spent in the e-com space. It's changed dramatically. Uh, it started off really with an e-commerce business. We were on Amazon. We were one of the probably the first 100 marketplace sellers on Amazon, and went direct consumer very early on. So I like to say that we're like a first generation Game Boy. And then I reached out to a good friend who was managing my Amazon account from Amazon, James Thompson. He was just starting Prosper Show, and he asked me to join. And then I also was just starting Stubana, which was solving a lot of my inventory and order management pains of being a multi-channel seller. And I asked him to join, and the rest is history. We both scaled businesses in parallel. We both helped each other along the way. And like, we not only survived, right? We thrived, and I think we built some really cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I just got off a call with James. I'm one of his biggest fans too. I guess, that connection makes a whole lot of sense too. I mean, you're just both great guys and lead, with authenticity and how can I help first. I'll never forget the first time I was introduced to James, probably, I don't know, 18 months ago, maybe something like that. And I got off the call and, he's running an agency of 200 plus people at that point. He's had wild success himself, but on the back of that call, he introduced me to like six people. He'd never met me before, didn't know who I was, and was willing to go out on a limb and make those introductions. And it's always sat with me. So while I'm sitting here coughing, and hopefully the team is good enough to edit that one out as well, what I'll say, and even if they don't, it's totally fine. We're all human here. What I'll say is, I'd love you to go a little deeper before I start rattling off questions, because like you said, you've had some great success. But I mean, what does that success look like? You talk about Scubana, and I know that you've sold it. Like, you told me about some of the other businesses and through this journey, like, give me a little more. Give me a little more as and again, you're a super humble guy.
Let's circumvent all the bullshit, right? I think we spend our lives working towards accomplishing something, and then you finally accomplish it, and then you say, "Oh snap! Now what?" And Cubana was over 2,000 days of like high highs and low lows, and it was certainly an adventure. It was a very cathartic experience, and then suddenly you sell it, and a big part of my identity was wrapped up in it. So then it's like, okay, well, let me go harvest not only time, but like my energy, because I've been deploying energy towards this business for such a long time. So I actually took a huge reset after the sale of Cubana and focused on uh, really hiring coaches. So I focused on finding coaches, hiring coaches to elevate me as a person, as a human being, so I can come away from this reset better than when I began it. I also spent a ton of time with my wife and with my son, building that relationship and the foundation and witnessing beautiful moments in my son's life as he grew. Uh, but yeah, so I spent that time. I also went through a little bit of a dark period, right? I went through a dark period of like, what's next? There's a lot of unknown, and I've never had an unknown in my life like this in a long time. So I'm just like unpacking, right? That with success also opens up other opportunities of reflection and also perception, my ways of perceiving the world, and allowed me to evolve as a human.
Yeah. Wow. I have so much to unpack there when it comes to questions to ask you right now. Like, you talked a little bit about right now. Well, firstly, let me start from the start. You came onto the show, and we've spoken. I'm also a recent father. I've got a less than 3 month old at home. For those of you who haven't had parents yet, I didn't go down the how many weeks he is, but I've learned why people talk in weeks. But anyway, I'm getting already into the being a proud father type area. But you said you're a father first. What does that
Mhm.
actually mean to you, and how does that sort of dictate how you live your life?
Yeah. So I think we're living in the luckiest period of life right now, and there's so many blessings, right? Everything's at your fingertips. And another blessing is the fact that I can work and do my craft from anywhere. And I think I have a soundtrack in my head of like how my relationship was with my father. And my father was working, doing the grind from 9 to 7 and would come home, and there wasn't DVRs at the time, right? There was no Netflix, and he just didn't deploy those resources into me, right? He needed to essentially deploy those resources back into himself so he can actually like wake up the next day and make money for our family. And so uh, I'm really flipping that paradigm differently in my own family construct, right? I'm looking to put my son first no matter what. And there's certain trade-offs that I'm no longer willing to make or that I won't make that my father did make, which is just essentially going from like a strength, because I do think there's a lot of strengths of the way my father and my family raised me, but taking that onto and evolving that and going to the next amazing place. and building from a different perspective. So hopefully that answers the question. Uh, but like I'm a family man first. I will put my son above anything, right? And will take the time necessary to make sure that like our relationship and our bond is intact and that he has the values necessary to succeed as a human.
That does make a ton of sense to me. And I can hear you loud and clear. I think once you go through that journey and you have that experience, everything shifts, in a moment, the way you look at life. And, I would say, and it probably rings true for a guy like you too, is like, I didn't become any more motivated when my son was born. I don't really know how much more motivated I could be when it comes to succeeding in the things that I hold dear in terms of like my professional and personal development. But I think that the whole perspective of like my appreciation for my parents and what they did in raising me and how I want to live my life a lot more intentionally definitely shifts. So yeah, that does
Mm.
make a ton of sense.
And I recently heard a quote. I was talking to somebody whose business was recently acquired, and they were talking about how money tends to change people. And the thought for me is that money, the people are who they are, right? Your business gets acquired, and now you have more money. It actually amplifies who you already are. And I think the same thing happens when you have a child, is that it amplifies like the values that you want to create in your life, the values that you've been holding dear to. It just like exposes those more.
All right, we look different, but we're still the same people. We simply had some technical difficulties, and I'll put my hand up and say I had some technical difficulties. We're saved. We're here. We're back. We had some great chats about everything from fatherhood to, well, we only got 10 minutes in. So, on the back of that chat, I want to continue that flow. And I really want to just keep diving in deep here because I feel like we're only just getting started and we don't have all that much time. So I asked you the question before about an intent this time, going around the twist, and now looking to build your next SaaS company. And maybe we cover this, maybe we didn't get this far in, but maybe let's just restate or take a second and talk a little bit about where you're at right now, where the company's at. I got to see some really early demos of what you were building back in New York, and it looked really impressive. I mean, we're sort of 6, 7 months out since then, so I can only begin to imagine just how
Mhm.
far you've taken it. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about what you've built, where you're heading, and a
Yeah.
little bit about the vision around it. I'd love to see what it looks like this time around.
hmm Yeah. So just to get to your initial question, which was like building for a sale, right? For me, I'm all about trying to provide maximal value for other people, right? And when you do that, when you create value for others, you're rewarded for it, right, monetarily. And essentially, it'll contribute to like other humans flourishing. So with with Stubana or even with Profasee, like we just want to create value and make customers happy. And the end result of that, right? If you're blessed and you do what your promise is and you deliver on that promise, you get rewarded for it in a much bigger way. So the new company that I've started is, and I don't want to. This is not about a pitch, right? I'm just sharing with you what I'm up to. Um, right now, there's a ton of supply chain pressure. There's price pressure, compression. There's compression of margins. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the aggregator space, raw material costs are going up, PPC inflation is happening, and the one lever that I noticed that many people aren't pulling right now is price. And the question is are you optimally priced with your products on Amazon? And Amazon is this massive marketplace that is still inefficient, though it's mature, and there's arbitrage opportunity throughout the day to capitalize on maximizing your price and optimizing your price all the time throughout the entire day. Very similar to like Uber surge pricing, smart pricing by Airbnb. Expedia does this, even Amazon does this. But like the 2 million brands that are on Amazon actually don't have this access. There's a lot of repricers out there currently that reprice simply to win the buy box. Yet that's not like the actual current model that people are utilizing, right? People are actually building their own brand and going direct consumer and building like digitally native Amazon brands. And so like that's our core focus. So really, it's a pricing platform to predict the perfect price for every product at each and every moment of the day.
Is that specifically for an on Amazon experience?
Yeah, it's specifically for Amazon brands. So we're just giving them that same superpower.
So I just want to take a step back for anyone who's listening and they're not familiar with the repricing game or what exists in market today. I'm acutely familiar. My fiance happens to work for a company called SellerSnap, who they are
Mm-hmm.
an AI powered Amazon repricer looking to
Mm-hmm.
winning specifically that to reprice for the buy box. So there is this huge market of resellers, and that's not going to change. But ultimately, for anyone who's not really in the Amazon ecosystem, if you're not winning the buy box, first and foremost, then you're not really getting seen and you're not going to convert. So it's a fundamental. But what Chad's talking about here and what Profasee really is going to address is not only winning, if I'm understanding correctly, the buy box, but also understanding what is the optimal price. Like when you look at, I would say like profit wells, for example, would be that for SaaS, where they're trying to optimize for what is the right price for a customer to actually purchase the product, and you're sort of looking to maximize. And if you just look at like the sheer mechanics and volume of an Amazon brand, we're talking about in many cases, tens, hundreds, and thousands. I was at times selling thousands, doing thousands of transactions a day, and so if I'm buying, if I'm selling at $20 versus $24 because I just thought I couldn't get up to that price point, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money every week, every month, every year. So anyway, I just felt it probably worthwhile. I'd love to hear your take on it, Chad, because I probably butchered it in comparison to someone who's actually building a product like this.
Uh, I'm, so I think I just want to address something that you mentioned, right? And I didn't know, by the way, your wife worked there, but that's pretty cool. And I've known those guys for a long time. We had a nice partnership at SellerSnap with Stubana. And essentially, what I'm noticing in the SaaS community right now, specifically, there's a lot of hype, right? And there's a lot of this. If you look at everyone's website, their H1, their header tag is advertising AI,
Yep.
right? But most of it is actually absolute BS, right? Essentially, it's a false claim and it's really weak logic that's masquerading as an AI company. And so,
Amen.
yeah, it's a problem. And like I was thinking in my mind yesterday, I was like, what other companies like advertise this and don't deliver, right? Like, I don't know how this is even acceptable. And people have come to accept it because like that's just the way it is, right? And people just accept things the way that they are typically.
It's also very hard if you don't have access to the back end of what's going on to actually, like, I mean, I'm not going to name names of companies that I've seen sort of spin that same message of AI and automation, where it's really
Hmm.
built on a baseline logic of parameters. There's no actual intuitive learning built into the platform. It's rule based
Totally.
systems.
Yep. And the hype washes off, right? People start to understand like once they start to drive the car and realize there's no engine, like whether you have a fancy algo or not, it comes down to whether the product solves a real problem and delivers on their promise.
Yep.
So, so we actually have a data science team. We have machine learning engineers, and it's quite beautiful the results that we've been able to achieve so far. Like we're in beta, so we just finished our first beta experiment, and we were able to increase revenue by 16%. It's crazy, and increase profit by 10%, and increase bestseller rank by 30%. And these are
Wow.
just the early findings. And like our investors, which I pitched yesterday, so it's been a day. I already raised $1 million in that time period. They are shocked. They're like,
Congratulations.
if you can, thank you. If you can deliver this at scale, you're a $1 billion company. And that's the goal is to like deliver this at scale, right? To replicate these results and to do it over and over again. Because right now, all these Amazon sellers, Amazon brands are experiencing this price compression, and nobody knows what the price should. Are they priced too high? Can they lower price and generate more profit dollars, absolute dollars, by lowering that price? Or can they increase price and not sacrifice BSR and just make more money and harvest those gains?
And it's for those of you not selling on Amazon, it is one of the most challenging things to get any credible data out of Amazon, especially as it relates to things of price comparison understanding. I mean, there's a company called Nozzle, which Chad, I don't know if you're across them, but they're a pretty cool platform where what they're building out is understanding LTV
Mm,
of customers inside of the Amazon ecosystem. And so
interesting.
again, until I heard of them, Nozzle.ai, I believe, is what their website is. Rail Klein, who has been on, great dude, South African guy out of the UK. But anyway, I think I just wanted to sort of labor the point here that it is so hard to get that clarity inside of marketplaces, and so yeah, to truly solve that equation, that is $1 billion idea.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's a beautiful problem. It's an interesting problem, and it's super challenging. And I'm excited for the challenge.
So let me take a step back. And I'm typically the one that takes us off track, but I'm going to try and do myself some justice here, or get some credibility back here and bring us back on track. So I asked you the question: was the intent to build with exit in mind? You started explaining that your intention was to create, a wildly valuable tool that's going to create tremendous wealth for others, and that was the intent. Now, does that still factor in to your logic of I'm going to build this to a certain point and then I no longer either want to take it any further? Like, are you an early startup guy? You like to build the logic, but then once things are humming along, you move on. I'm more asking specifically about your DNA here.
Yeah, my DNA is building, growing. Like I like to see it end to end, right? So full stack. I'm a full stack entrepreneur, and I love to see something being built and birthed from nothing, right? Then actually going from 0 to 1, and then see that all the way through. So like for me to think 7 years down the line that this thing is going to be acquired, I think that's awesome, right? And that would be my fourth acquisition. But right now, I'm just enjoying the journey of like I love the branding of Profasee. I love the values that I've inserted into the company. Everything about it, the site is really coming from all the mistakes that I've made in the past. And so I love this part of the process, and I like operating right and growing and adding members to the team and cultivating that talent. And then if there's a sale that's possible, and very few entrepreneurs actually ever make it to the sale, right? Just like very few entrepreneurs actually make it to the 0 to 1 stage, which is amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
like being able to witness starting something, growing it, and then like getting to that like 0.00001% of people that actually sell their business and have really fully like exited and created massive wealth for their family and for their legacy and for generations to come is just incredible experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to talk about that. But before we talk about that, I want to dive into one of the things that you said about you look back at some of the mistakes that you've made. And I'm curious, this is going to be, you said you've had four acquisitions, or you've had four exits, which is tremendous, mate. I mean, I don't need to tell you, but congratulations. I mean,
Three,
that's a
three,
pretty
three,
amazing.
three. Sorry.
Three. Sorry. This will be the fourth. See, that's how
Hmm.
intentional you are. Um, in those journeys,
Mm.
in those experiences, I mean, for people building technology, or any company for that matter, I mean, what are some of the fundamentals that you would say that you learnt those mistakes, and then going into Profasee, they will not be, to the best of your ability, they will not be visible or created inside of this
Well,
new
I'll
venture?
create new mistakes, right? But Stubana, we started in 2015. So until we sold in 2021, it's like literally 2,000 days, right? And some of those days were incredible, and some of those days were painful. Um, High highs, as you know, and low lows as an entrepreneur. That's just the adventure that we've chosen. And a lot of times when you're building, right? So like Stubana was my first software as a service software company. when you're starting something you've never done before, you're going to make costly mistakes. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose hair. As you can see, I've got not much left now. I've just got the chest to work on, and
It
um,
suits you, mate.
and you lose time. And that's the most important thing is time. And I think even having a child, right, you realize that time is like so finite. And I was just at a founder dinner last night, and I went into his cold plunge that he built in the back of his house, and we has a sauna, and we're chatting, and he's like how do you manage all this? Anyway, we can get into that in a second, but essentially, you're going to make these costly mistakes, and every day you're going to make these mistakes, and some of them matter more than others. And the first thing is like, how do you pick up from those mistakes? How do you build a framework around those mistakes so you don't make them again? And a lot of times when you build something, you unintentionally hurt people at the same time.
Hmm.
And it sucks. And it's just you make mistakes and you grow from them and you learn from them. So with Profasee, I really took some time. I was like hesitant to jump back in. I thought I'd be working at the company that bought us for a long time, and I didn't know I was going to do the entrepreneur stuff again. But I think I came to the heart-centered conclusion that like I am an entrepreneur at heart, and all we need to do is create like a rule of thinking around it. So like some of the things that I've been thinking about as I'm Profasee as it relates to Stubana. So Stubana was a back-end software, right? We were an operations platform, and people came to us as the doctor. They would say, "Hey, I'm in pain. Please solve my pain. Can you solve it? Create the workflows." Because like Stubana was all about orchestration and inventory. And we weren't on the revenue generating aspect of the business. We were cost save, maybe we're like efficiency software. And so right now, Profasee is directly correlated to your revenue. How can we help you make more money? And that was like a big learning for me is I wanted to be able to focus on helping people make more money versus save them time. And people value more money than they do time, unfortunately.
Well, just on that, I actually I would say that you probably did save people a ton of money with
Hmm.
Skubana and continue to post acquisition and that whole experience. I think what you're diving into is something that I deal with on the regular with our process improvement consulting practice at Scala is that it's so far removed from the dollars in because it's process improvement. So it's,
Hmm.
well, what's the actual tangible value proposition of it? And I would say the same is for inventory management. But the closer you are to the money, the easier it is to sell. And again, it's the psychology of the individuals who are leveraging that software or that service is money. Money in is really sort of the first motivator and driver. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think that it's a very smart position to play in because if you can give tangible results, like you said, 10% more profit, 16% more revenue just in your early stages of it. I mean,
Hmm.
it sells itself. Why would I not?
Yeah.
Why would I not get Profasee?
Yeah. And people want to see that ROI calculator, right? And we had such a hard time calculating that with Stubana, the ROI, even though it's there, right? It's in your face. It's like, hey, instead of piecing together all these softwares, we can do all the work for you, automate it. So I just wanted to have a different approach. You asked me like a big difference, and that's one of them is focusing on that. And I want to just talk about Scala for a second. If you think about what you're building, right? You're building an army of VAs that are scalable. Technically, that's like the first iteration of AI, right? AI is logic at scale, and I think it's a very interesting way to think about the SOPs that you're creating and the teams that you're building to enable and empower companies.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, Multiply Me is more on the
Oh,
talent
so,
search side. Escala
yeah.
is the process improvement, but you tied them both together. I'll tell you because it's very apparent to me that you're a big vision guy. And when I look at the future state of Multiply Me, Escala, and where we're headed, if you just break down everything that we're doing, and I would imagine very few people are trying to think through like what's the end game here, or not that there's necessarily an end game, but what's the game here? And for me, with Escala, we have the ability to understand, fix, design, and build any business operationally. So we build out the SOPs, training videos, documentation in an optimal fashion, building for its future state, and also the hiring strategy and org strategy. Who do you need? When do you need them? And what does that look like? And then we can overlay that with finding talent that is, playing the geolocation based arbitrage where it's high value talent at lower cost centers because the cost of living is lower. So ultimately, we can go into any business now and we can make it operationally more sound and we can reduce those operating costs. So we become effectively a vehicle for scale up, or I would argue long term private equity, or I'm calling it VC 2.0, as an ability to really come in there and impact that SDE and realistically increase that multiple on the back end. So yeah, I definitely it's like manual AI.
Nice. It's beautiful. Uh, so back to the question is like, so that's like one big difference, right? Being in the revenue stream. Mm, I would say like having taken some time, I did a lot of work on personal values. And so being able to insert those values and like live those values and have them on our website and inject them into the company. And then, you know, I've also been, I during this time, right, I really found out my life mission and thinking about how I can actually, in parallel, inject that purpose into what I've built as a company. Like the question then is like, do you inject it into the company, or is the company an enabler of your purpose? Is it supposed to be your purpose? Right? Those are all the things like I struggled with when I
Mm-hmm.
started
Mm-hmm.
Profasee. And so like my life purpose and mission that I uncovered during my what I call the great reset of my life was
Yep.
to create holy moments and sacred experiences to elevate the human condition. And so I love having like ceremonies and having moments and circumventing bullshit to activate potential. And so I'm like working in parallel on this cool passion project. I just bought a yacht that I'm going to be getting people together to have experiences, but also to go deep and to activate ourselves and activate each other in a more meaningful way.
Amazing, mate. Well, once you get that going, you got my number, mate. I'm there. But
It's called Deep and Sassy, by the way. That's the name of it. It's
yeah,
the
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
deepandsassy.com. I haven't launched it yet, but I'm in the process of working on it.
Very cool, very cool. I can't wait to read more about it. I want to sort of go a little bit deeper there. So you built the purpose around your life mission and you talked
Mhm.
about either coupling or decoupling that from the business. You said that with Scubana, sounds like a lot of your identity was wrapped up in the company, and so like you said earlier that you had your dark moments as well. I'm sure sort of if you don't have a plan for what's next, someone who's so, I would say you're pretty meticulous and methodical and quite calculated and intentional with all the things that you're doing, having that experience can sort of leave you with a pretty big hole in your life. So going through this whole experience now, what does your life look like today? Like when you talk about being intentional both with the company and like what's your daily routine, or how much time are you investing in the company? Are you still doing the hustle culture and trying to work 45 million hours a week? And I mean, I'm not a believer of that. That's not like personally, but I would love to hear sort of how you've designed your life in
Yeah,
a way that creates that meaning.
yeah. So one I want to share is like you have to know my history, and my history is I grew up in a very I would say poor family, and so I don't think I can ever migrate away from that mentality. So uh, I'm wealthy, but I identify as poor. And I think I work as if I'm poor constantly. So that's something I'm like working with, right? I'm working with that all the time. It's an app that's open, but it's not maybe at the forefront of the screen.
Yep.
Um, and so my work life right now is like I said when we first started this podcast together, is that I'm not willing to make certain trade-offs, and I'm not working nearly as much as I was when I was single. Then I got married. Then I got a cat. Then I had a child. And so I would say like the amount of time, that's why time is so important, is finite, and I have to make the most of the time that I'm spending. But right now I wake up at 5 a.m. and I believe that actually you should start your day 4 hours before your day really starts, but I haven't gotten there yet, so I'm at 5. And then at 7 a.m. I'm with my son. I wake him up, we make breakfast together, pancakes or French toast or whatever, and then I really start my day at 9. And typically I'm going from like 9 to 4:30. Sometimes I cut out sooner, and I may pick it up at night after I put my son down to bed. I do bath time with him. So uh, I'm not really counting hours, I'm counting performance.
Yep.
And like, am I doing the highest impact, highest value activities I possibly can be doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And I'm also a 5 hours up at 4:30 this morning. I get up, I feed Leo, take the dog for a walk, strap Leo to me. He's 3 months old, and that's my morning. I grab a coffee, come back, hand Leo back to Tully by sort of 9:30, 10 a.m. and off I go into the office. And I'm working probably more hours than I should, but I think like you, I mean, I didn't necessarily grow up poor, but I think that, I haven't had an exit. I haven't had,
Mm,
we're still building a bootstrap business where, plus minus profitability, we just keep adding more and more and more resources to keep, supercharging what we're building here. And we're still sort of, less than 3 years into this venture. But I definitely have that mentality where I'm more intentional with my time. And I think like becoming a parent, it forces you to be very intentional. If you want to be there, like I try and get home for bath time, 7 p.m. as much as I can.
mm,
It's not every day, unfortunately, but um, it's about output. Like the way we look at it in the operation is I don't care how many hours you work. And quite frankly, I prefer you work less hours than more hours because you're going to be more productive. But I think what's most important is you have accountability and responsibility and you're operating in your zone of genius or your perfect place or whichever analogy you want to use from whichever book you've
mm.
read. And yeah, I gravitate deeply to how you both structure the way in which you're living your life. And I think that more entrepreneurs out there, doesn't matter what stage of the journey you're on, should be more intentional about how
Mm.
they invest their time. And there's lots of like things that you can do to get clarity on it, like a taxonomy of value where you understand what are the key drivers of the business and just getting clarity. But you're about to say something, and I'm sure it's going to be
Oh
profound.
no, it's not profound at all. Actually, I was like, yeah, I follow you and what you're posting, and I've seen that you're also working out, and I'm curious when are you carving out that time?
Yeah, so I mean I do a lot of walking with the dog. So I've got a 3 year old pit bull cross Staffy. So she needs a lot of exercise. So
Mm.
in the morning I'm walking probably 5, 6, 7 kilometers. I probably clock about 10 kilometers a day, which is maybe let's call it like 1,500 steps. I'm walking a day, and on top of that, I'm spending 3 days in the gym with a personal trainer, and that for me just holds me accountable. And also, like it's pretty great having someone watch your technique. Like I used to be a CrossFit coach in my early
Oh, really?
20s while I
Didn't
was
know that.
studying. Yeah. I used to compete at a pretty solid level in Australia,
Mm.
and then yeah, realize that I don't need to be putting, 200, picking up 200 kilo, 450 pounds off the ground and putting 265 over my head. It's an unnecessary thing. And got really into yoga and meditation, Pilates when I was living in LA, and still sort of hold on to that too. So anyway, I'm not carving out as much time as I'd like. In my optimal, I'm also doing 2 to 3 days a week of swimming. There's an amazing pool called
Mm.
Gordon Pool here in Tel Aviv. It's literally it's ocean water. So they deplete the pool every day, clean it, and fill it back up, and it's the best thing ever.
Nice. Yeah, to be efficient with my time, I built a CrossFit box. Well, it's like a gym. I built it in my garage, and I've been doing that. So I have a virtual trainer twice a week. I do one workout on my own on Mondays, and then I have a boxing coach coming on Wednesday and Friday. So I've
Nice. How
been
good is
busy
boxing?
myself. Boxing is amazing, and it's like a combination of boxing, which is just so different. Just like typically, I'm doing CrossFit workouts. Like I've
Yep.
got my birthday coming up on Friday. I'm doing this Murph. I'm sure you know what the Murph is.
Oh God. Have you
So
got the weight vest?
I'm not doing it RX. So I'm doing the mile run. I'm doing 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and a mile run. But I'm not going to do the weighted vest. I'll save that
It's
for.
it's a it's a rough workout. Murph is awful.
Yeah, I'm
In one of
really
the
looking
CrossFit
forward to.
games, they did a double Murph.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd. My well, claim to fame. I've got 52 consecutive kipping chin ups and a 319 Fran time.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I was competing at a pretty solid level in my mid 20s.
Hmm.
I'm now in my mid 30s, but mate, I think that we really just going through this conversation. We highlight some really key things that I think is I wouldn't say necessarily a cheat code per se, but a lot of people who push the hustle culture and think that if I can just get 5 and 10 and 15 more hours out of my week, I'm going to produce more or more quality. But ultimately, what I found in my journey is that the law of diminishing returns. And if I'm not working out, if I'm not meditating every day, if I'm not journaling, if I'm not spending time with, with my family, if I'm not spending time with the dog, if I'm not actually blocking out these things, then ultimately I lose any of that drive that I have. And I think it's as important, if not more so, to get ahead of both the mental and physical game that sets you up to be a lot more efficient and productive when you actually step into work.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So let's dive a little bit more into, I guess, what we're talking about when we talk about built for exit. So you've made some, pretty great strides here. I mean, we talked about the fact that you've just raised some capital as well, and that journey is somewhat different to Scubana in the sense that, it sounds like you put a lot of capital behind it, personal capital in the first place, and this time, you have a demonstrable track record, so I'm sure you can attract, a lot more capital. Two questions I'm going to ask you here. I tend to get caught up in my own thoughts, and so I want to make it clear. The first is, when what have you learned from the first time in terms of building Scubana and investing all of your capital? And it sounds like maybe it was a bootstrapped to raise. Like, what was that journey like? And then the
Mm.
second question will be, what is it, or when you're going through this process, like, how have you attacked the capital raising process?
Yeah. So for the first question, when we first started Stubana 2015, I put a lot of my personal money in. So, I was a very early Amazon brand. I went D2C. I was probably one of the first 100 brands on Amazon. So we had SaaS margins, which is not possible on Amazon these days anymore. But the margins were incredible. The margin profile was beautiful. So I put $2 million of my own capital in, and it still wasn't enough. I also used resources from my e-commerce business. Still wasn't enough. So we did a friends and family round. I raised $880,000 from friends and family, which
Wow.
I wouldn't do again. It was very gracious of them to put in the money, but it became the topic of conversation at any Jewish holiday or even Hallmark holidays. And then second, it created a ton of pressure for me because I was so concerned about losing my friends and family's money. We also had, interestingly enough, I put together a list of the top 10 e-commerce thought leaders, or just like thought leaders I wanted in the business. And I cold messaged 10 of them with a very meticulous, thoughtful email that was extremely like hyper curated. And one person responded. And that person was Brian Lee from Honest Company. He started Honest Company with Jessica Alba, and he started LegalZoom with Robert Kardashian. And he not only responded, but invested, and then became on our board when we did our Series A. And it was amazing to have him part of the journey. He's super humble, like he's so thoughtful, and was just great to reflect ideas off of. So as it relates to Profasee now, my wife is like, no, you're not using our own personal money again. You're not, I really prefer you not to raise friends and family, right? That was so stressful. And like, let's do it. Let's build back differently. So uh, I've put in some of my own personal capital, but like not nearly the 2 mil. And By the way, I got that back on the sale, which is also amazing. So that was
Yeah,
great.
I assumed.
Yeah.
I assumed.
Yeah.
and,
Uh,
and hopefully a lot more.
and so yeah, so now I was like, okay, like this is a hard problem. This is a really challenging. It's an interesting problem. It's capital intensive. Let's let's raise money and do it the right way the first time. Not try to bootstrap it and try to keep every percentage and be dilution sensitive the way I was. So I think that's a big difference. Is I've used a little bit of my own capital to start things off until we did the capital raise, and I just did a pretty big pre-seed raise from the same investors that we had on board at Stubana previously. Like they did well, and they saw me in my best parts of me as an entrepreneur and the worst parts, and so we knew what each of us were getting into. Right, we had that relationship pre-existing.
I think that's such an important thing. Where we talk now about raising capital and what that would look like, and some of the things. I'm building technology as well, not in the e-commerce space, but more in the recruitment space, let's call it. Just identifying some pretty big gaps in the market, and you know, I said to you before, like we're bootstrapped, we're sitting here, we're always plus minus profitability, but we just keep injecting. I've got 9 in my product team right now, and that'll bloat to probably 15 to 20 by the end of the year. And it's like every dollar in, dollar out. And I'm not super worried about dilution. That's not my sort of driver here. I'm happy for it because we've got a bit of a demonstrable history now and operating, and being able to do it with 100 grand in the business to where we are today
Mm,
definitely builds a bit of sort of credibility. But I think that the most important thing is, if I were to look for an investor, it's going to be someone that I know, that I trust, that I've gone through the journey and I understand, just like a partner, a business partner, just like any of those decisions. I mean, you got to have some pretty honest and real conversations with them, and you're ultimately accountable, on both sides. And so it's really cool to hear that they believed in you, they saw through a 7-year journey and your evolution, and they're getting Chad 2.0 or 3.0
hmm
now. And so I'm sure that it's going to go great, and that's going to be a really exciting journey. So just out of curiosity, what is the team? You said you've got some AI engineers. I'm going to mess up the different roles, but how big is the team right now?
We're 10 people currently. Yeah, so
Beautiful.
it's
And you
all,
said
yeah, I was just going to say, so we've got the engineering team, like the traditional back end, front end engineers. I have a product manager, and then we've built a whole data science team. So that consists of a data scientist. I've actually have one data scientist in Israel that I'm working with, but I've the full-time data scientist
shocking.
is located in yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting profession too. We also have a machine learning ops individual who's like essentially taking the model and putting it into production. And then we have like a machine learning engineer who is like, say, driving the car, right? He's
so, so, so I asked that question with a little bit of a hidden agenda here, because you said you have a
mhm.
product manager. I'm curious, now that you have built a team and you have a product manager, how does your role differ today in this new venture as it related to when you were building Scubana?
Well, at Cubana, I had a co-founder, so that's a big difference, huge
Yeah, okay.
difference. So I was like, I want to do this myself. And it's going to be hard, and I'm going to be on the journey like all alone. But so I'm doing with
Why
no
that
co-founders.
decision?
Uh, I just let's see. I founder co-founders create more challenges, right? There's more like metaphorical red tape. Uh, Interest could differ over time,
Hmm.
and I wanted to not have any red tape. Like I wanted to be the decision maker all through and through. Like I picked the brand, I picked the colors, I picked the logo, I picked the team, I build everything from scratch. And just like I think that self-awareness has been really, really helpful in, as you call, Chad 2.0 and building Profasee. So yeah, but that's a big shift. So I've never built a dev team before. I've never built a data science team before. And first of all, I already made mistakes. I've grossly underestimated, what it would take the costs of doing business, and I'm learning, and I love it. It's great.
I mean, that's the journey, right? It's about solving wicked problems and finding your way out of it. I guess, that is the fun of entrepreneurship. And I've said it a few times in like the last week, but I feel like it's the first couple of weeks that I've felt comfortable in even identifying as an entrepreneur. For me, it was like really not taboo, but I was like, come on, like you're trying to solve problems. That's all you're trying to
Mm.
do. And then when you start to connect the dots, I mean, it's probably closely aligned with the definition of.
And there's a just on that. There's a really amazing quote that I love from Jordan Peterson, and it's problems are secret calls to adventure. And there's
Love it.
never not a problem in business, right? There's always challenges coming up. And there's like the business that you're in, and there's the business that you're becoming, and you're constantly evolving. It's transforming consistently. And just I think I always think about that quote. I'm like, okay, like this is going to open up a great door for me. Like I know I'm going through it right now. I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that, or we can't make payroll, right? All this like crap that nobody talks about, and
Being
it
there.
opens up some, yeah, it opens up something so magical and great, and you always come out the other side stronger.
Amen. And I think that's a beautiful point to round this episode out. As much as I'd love to continue for the next 2 hours, I know that we both have some hard stops here. So, Chad, before I say goodbye virtually, and I hope that we get to see each other in the physical form in the not too distant future. Anyone who might be interested in Profasee, I know it's in beta right now, but where are you at? How can they reach you? How can they get on a wait list, or how can they start leveraging the platform?
Yeah, yeah. So it's Profasee, Profasee. It's a play on words. Profit, you could see, prophecy. And so they can go to
Smart.
prophecy.com. They can sign up for the wait list. We do have a pretty long wait list because there's nobody in the market that's doing this. And so they can sign up. They can reach out to me, Chad at prophecy.com. They can check out my LinkedIn. They can do more research. And I'm an open book. I'm super transparent. I'm an open door. Like, reach out to me. I'm here to support you in whatever you need. Yeah.
Amazing. And I can definitely attest to that. Chad, thanks so much for taking the time. And mate, it's been an honor, and I can't wait to see how far you take Prophecy.
Thanks, Yoni. Thanks for having me on.